Hello, it's Steve Mills here, and welcome to another edition of the Results Mastery podcast. It's great to be back. I do apologize a little bit because I'm a little bit nasal. I'm a bit sort of got a bit of a cold there, but do you know what? It's been a few days since I produced my last podcast, so I thought I'd get right on there and do it, even if I'm not really 100%. But I'll try and be 100% for you today. Try and make sure that, your time, which I value enormously, is well spent by spending time on my podcast today. So today's podcast is called How to Win at Anything. Now, it's a little bit of a, bizarre thing to say, yes, listen to me and I can teach you how to win at anything, and, it almost, I hate to use the word bullshit, but it does smack a little bit of that. But it's not. It's a process that, if applied to anything, could really make a big difference to you. And it's something that I've learned from somebody else, right? This is not like Steve Mills's idea. This is an idea that I learned from originally from Tony Robbins. Now, you may have heard of Tony. If you haven't, he's the highest paid consultant in the world. So he's a little bit higher than me. And his business turns over, I believe, 9 billion, or his businesses, because he's got many businesses, turns over 9 billion with a B per year. So you would think he's got a rough idea about how to win and how to be successful. Now, I sort of, it's weird. When I tell you, I learnt this from Tony, I did. I learnt the structure of it from Tony. But actually, do you know what? I learnt it many, many years ago when I was probably a teenager. And I'd never even heard of Tony Robbins, let alone about listening to, literally thousands of hours of his stuff that I've done over the years. And what I learned was that if you're going to be successful, you got to know what you want. And that is really important, I believe, because most people say, yeah, I want to win, I want to be successful, I want to be, grow my business, I want to get more sales in. And actually, they might want all that, but they're not willing to do anything, which is sort of step one of doing anything is writing down what it is you want and when you're going to get it by. Now, I know you've heard that 1,001 times. If you read any and listen to any of the world's leading experts, they will all talk to you about, the fact that, 98% of people don't have written goals, and that the 2% that do are now worth more than the 98% that didn't. And, I do believe that's, give or take, fairly true. But, it's all about understanding what you want. That's what Tony says, and that's what I'm telling you. And that's what I believe, and I hope you do too. And I hope even more that you take action and do something with it. Because there's no point spending time on my podcast today if you're not going to do anything. So, number one, write down what you want. Number two is put together a plan, right? Let me give you an example. You want to be better at marketing. You've got to have a plan of exactly what you're going to do, not just like a goal, right? I want to, turn over £1 million this year, or increase my business by £1 million, or whatever it is. It's a plan to achieve that. Without that, it's just a daydream. If your idea of doing well is getting a Ferrari, then what's the plan for getting a Ferrari? If you're not doing anything, you're never going to have one, probably, unless you win the lottery. And that could be your plan. The plan is to keep buying lottery tickets, excuse me, and hope that you one day strike it rich. But, you're looking at about 50 million to one. So, chances are, you're going to be waiting a long time. Let's just put it that way. So, if we need a plan, we need a better plan than, buying a weekly lottery ticket and hoping that it's going to work. And it could be that, your plan is not about money, your plan is about something else. Quite a few of you know I come from a background as a former international sportsman, having played my chosen sport for 10 years professionally at international level, that being table tennis, which by interest is also the world's #1 participation sport. So the more people play table tennis in the world than any other sport. Now, those of you are thinking, no, it's not, it's fishing, Steve. No, that's the UK's #1 participation sport, but it's not popular all over the world. And anyway, it's the table tennis is the Chinese national sport, and I think there's something like 4 billion of those. So therefore, it's played by quite a few people. So but I look back when I was trying to get good at table tennis, and I thought, right, I've got certain, I used to call them areas, certain areas of my game. I've got my forehand, I've got my backhand there, I've got my serves, my return of serve, my footwork. Up here, mentally, am I mentally strong? What about my touch? What about my speed? How quick are my reactions? What about me physically? Am I fit enough? What do I need to do to get fitter? Trying to think what else. What about my forehand smash where I hit the ball past people? What about my ability to get the ball back when somebody's hit it at me really hard? These are all key performance indicators, really. That's what I call them now. They're key areas of my table tennis game, of my life, of my relationships, if you will, and certainly of my business and my marketing and my sales and so on. So if you want to be good at marketing, if winning is about growing your business, then you need to think about what are your key performance indicators. So they could be things like your website, your email marketing, your database, your LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. They're all key performance indicators. Your YouTube channel, your networking, the marketing brand that you've developed, and how true to your brand you are. I meet businesses all the time and they've got a website and you look at their business card and it doesn't look anything like their website, or they've got a brochure that's totally different to their business card and so on and so forth. And it ends up just a hodgepodge of different things that don't really make any sense because, there's no consistency. Consistency is a real key, isn't it? If you think about it, consistency in table tennis, if you can get the ball on the table more often than somebody else, you got a good chance of winning. Consistency in business, in marketing, is about getting that message out consistently. And yet, what do most people do? They either are really struggling and so they do some marketing, and as soon as they start doing well, they stop doing that marketing because they're that busy, they've not got time to do it. So they shrink back to where they were before, where they've not got any business, and then they start again. And they're on that vicious, they're on that hamster wheel, just going round and round and round and never getting anywhere. So, that's not what I want for you, and I'm sure you don't either. So we've got to put together a plan, and again, if I'm looking at, how do you get more rewards? How do you win? Well, let me ask you a question. Do you win, do you think, by doing a little bit, or do you win by doing a lot? You know the answer to that. It's doing a lot, isn't it? You don't become an international table tennis player by practicing once a fortnight. I can tell you that. When I started playing when I was 14, I played every day, every single day until I was 18. And on my 18th birthday, I played against the Chinese world champion in 4 years from start to playing the Chinese world champion. Now, I did get my arse kicked, I'll tell you that. But it was an amazing improvement in just 4 years to go from a beginner to someone playing again, good enough to play against a world champion. And so it is, in business. If you're going to do well on LinkedIn, you got to have a plan for that. But it's got to be, most people's plan is something like this on LinkedIn. It's, well, Steve, I post on LinkedIn once a fortnight because I don't want to bombard people. And I've got probably about 500 contacts. And I'm in a couple of groups, but I don't really do very much. Guess what rewards that person's going to get? Well, I can almost guarantee they're going to get no or very little rewards. Now, if you ask me what's your plan on LinkedIn, I'd say, well, I post on there between 5 and 10 times every day, including videos. I've got a weekly newsletter that goes out to thousands of people. I'm connected to over 13,000 people, and I ask 10 new people every day to connect. I get about a 70% conversion rate, so 7 out of 10. I then follow those people up with a message. I then phone those people, speak to them, and try and turn them into meetings. That's what I do, and that wins me, let's say, over 100 grand a year. Okay, so and if you looked at the my website plan, you'll see a similar thing. If you looked at my email marketing, how often do I send out emails? 2 or 3 times a week. Most people, you're lucky if it goes out once a month. We've got I hear people all the time. They'll say, "Oh yeah, yeah, we do email marketing." I say, "Oh right, great. What do you do?" They'll say, well, we send out a newsletter once a month, or even sometimes once a quarter. Can you believe that? That's like, if I was a single man and I went out on a date and I said to the lady, I really enjoyed meeting you today and spending time with you. I'd love to go out on another date. And she said, yeah, I enjoyed it too, Steve. And I said, well, I'll tell you what I'll do is I'll send you an email in 3 months' time. How about that? That would be crazy, wouldn't it? That would be absolutely stupid. That lady's not going to stick around. She's not going to think I'm interested. She's going to think, do you know what? There's plenty more fish in the sea. I don't need to wait 3 months for Steve. And, when I call, she probably won't even remember who I am. And yet we do that all the time with our customers. We do that all the time with our prospects. We connect to people on LinkedIn and then never even contact them. Is that true? Or is that true? I know it's true. It might not be true with you, but it's true with 99% of the businesses that I speak to. So that's step two, right? Now, step three, so we know what we want. We're going to take action. Step three is knowing whether it's working or not. This is the biggest mistake that people make, a lack of quantification. They don't quantify, they don't measure the numbers, the marketing numbers. Not talk about financial numbers. Most businesses have got a rough idea where they are financially, if not a good idea. But I'm talking about marketing numbers, which support those financial numbers. How many people are coming to your website? How many contacts have you got on LinkedIn? How many inquiries did you get? How many emails go out? How big's your open rate? What are you doing to improve the biggest problem that you, I, and every small business has got, and that is overcoming obscurity. That is our biggest problem. We're not known by enough people. If my target market was hotels in the UK, then in an ideal world, I'd need a database with the owner and the manager of every single hotel in the UK. But I ain't got that. So what am I going to do? Well, I've got to work on that. My database really is, I suppose it's business owners. I specialize a lot with working with people who are, excuse me again, consultants, advisors, coaches, and people like that. And so, really, in an ideal world, I'd have all the people that I need in my list, but I never have, and nobody has because that list is constantly evolving. There's new people, there's people leaving, there's people retiring, and there's people packing their businesses. 80% of small businesses fold within 5 years. So you could say that about 18,000 businesses, or no, sorry, 18% of businesses go bust each year. You could argue that it's about that, whatever it is. So we must start to measure what you do. We use a great system, by the way. It's called 90, NINETY.io. Strongly recommend you use it. It's brilliant. It's what's known as an entrepreneurial operating system. And it's a great tool. Takes a little bit, if you're not very IT or technology driven, it take a little while to understand it. But do you know what? It's not that difficult. And if you are, it'll be like a duck to water. It'll be really easy. So go and have a look at that. I'm not on commission, by the way. So just go and have a look and see what you think. You can get a free trial of it and make your own mind up. So that's number three. So we got, again, just to reiterate, know what you want, when you want it, and so on. Number two is take action, and you're going to take what sort of action? A little bit or massive action? You're going to take massive action. Number three, you're going to measure what's working and what isn't. Number four, then, is you're going, if it's not working, which it won't always, anybody got marketing wrong in the past. I've got both hands up. Yeah, I've probably wasted more money on marketing than anybody listening to this because I've done more of it and I've done it for 30 years. And I've learned from it and I've learned what works and I measure what works. And I've taken this fourth step, which is if it doesn't work, change your approach. Now, somebody said to me, if it doesn't work, you give up. No, that's not the secret of success. That's not the way to win. If I'd have given up at table tennis, after the first 6 months, I wouldn't have got anywhere. Try give it up and try tennis or give it up and try football. That's never going to work. You got to stick at it. And I will tell you, my belief about marketing is that all marketing works. Everything. Everything works. It just doesn't work all the time because it's done badly, with all respect, by people who've done no training in it. They don't really know what they're doing, and they try it for a few weeks and then give up. They try Facebook AdWords. They've not had any training, but they've set up an ad and put some money in there. They spend a little bit of money. They get no leads, and they think, well, that's a waste of time. Let's go and try Facebook. Let's go and try LinkedIn ads or Google ads or whatever. And that's just a recipe for disaster because you're not sticking at it. So it all works, but you need to know what you want, measure what's working, change your approach. And what happens if it doesn't work then? What do you think you do? You change your approach again. And if it doesn't work then, what do? You change your approach again. How long do you keep going? Until you find what works. That's the secret of success. That's it. Know what you want, take action, if measure whether it's working or not, and if it's not, you're going to change your approach. That's how to win. That's how to win at ping pong, at table tennis, at football, in business, in sales, in marketing, and pretty much in life. If you want to find a man or a woman to date, if you're single, you got to do exactly that. You got to know what you want. What type of person do you want? What are their characteristics? What do they look like? What are they? What sort of person would be the right person for you? Once you know that, you've got to take action. Where are they? Well, how are you going to meet them? What are you going to do? So if you sit at home hoping that somebody's going to knock on the door, you could be sat there for a long time. So once you know that, you have to see if it's working or not. You may say, well, I want to do online dating, but online dating may or may not be working for you. So you do something else. You then got to, if it's not working, you've got to change your approach. Try something different. Try the way you're doing, if you're doing online dating, you might want to change your picture, you might want to improve your profile, you might want to select different people, and so on and so forth in order to find what really works. That I really strongly recommend those 4 steps. However, here's the big one. This is the big one. This is the reason I think I got so good at table tennis. Measure, sorry, I said that, measure success. I was going to say, I've already said that, haven't I? Model success. That's what I was going to say. Model success. So, in other words, if you want to be successful, find somebody who is already successful and do the same things. Now, I want to be clear. I'm not talking about copying their website, right? Or copying anything of theirs. I'm talking about modeling. And here's the difference. Modeling is going and looking at what they're doing, how they're positioning themselves, the things that they're saying, and then doing your own version of that. Let me give you a really good example. My results mastery program actually came out of a Tony Robbins program. His program is called, I think it's called Life Mastery. I'm trying to remember now. It's definitely got the word mastery in it, but it's got several actually. It's got life mastery, it's got business mastery, it's definitely had sales mastery because I've been on that program myself, and I quite like the idea of mastery. It sort of conjures up in my mind a word. Not that I'm perfect, I'm not a results expert. You know the definition of an expert, by the way? X means you're a has-been, and a spurt is a drip under pressure. So I hope I'm not an expert, because if I was, I would be a has-been drip under pressure. So I'm not an expert, but I like to think I've got to a level, certainly in many areas of my life, called mastery. And in marketing, nobody knows everything about marketing, and what you know today in 2 days' time will have changed because there'll be a new AI out or something like that. And so we need to constantly and never-endingly improve, by the way. Another gentleman, let me just show you this. Here we go. This is a guy I've learned a lot from over the years. Well, sorry, you can't see that there. Keith J. Cunningham. I love the title of his book, The Road Less Stupid. In it, Keith talks about one of the keys to being successful as a business owner. He says basically, if you want a better business, you've got to become a better business owner. You want a better business, you've got to become a better business. So it just makes sense, doesn't it? I've built a business, you've built a business, and whatever level that is, if I want to go to the next level, then I've got to learn more. What have I got to learn more about? Well, I've got to learn more about growing my business. So what's going to grow my business is 2 things: reducing costs and increasing sales. When I say grow my business, I'm talking about growing my profit, which is the purpose of a business. So if I've got to grow my profit, then I can reduce costs, I can increase sales. That's it. There's nothing else there, right? So we can reduce costs by a little bit, some way. But to really grow your business, you've got to work on increasing sales. To increase sales, you've got to work on getting more customers, getting customers to spend more each time they buy from you, and getting them to increase, getting you to increase the frequency or repeat business, the lifetime value, how much a customer is worth to you once you acquire that new customer. So they're the real keys. And just going back to my point five, which is modeling success, find somebody who's got what you want, do the same things, get the same or similar results. I did that many, many years ago when playing table tennis. I decided once I got to be easily the best player in Sheffield, I decided, right, okay, Sheffield was no longer for me. I needed to go to Manchester and practice with some of the top players in the country. And one guy in particular, a guy called John Hilton, who was ranked number one in Europe and number five in the world at one point. And but you know, these guys that I practiced with were some of the best players around, real professionals at what they did. They would fight like there's no tomorrow in order to win, and they did everything that they could. And I modeled them. You know, I didn't copy their style. I played very different to any of them. But I modeled, you know, the way they trained, their attitude, their will to win, their the things that they did, and the food that they ate even, and I thought, right, if that's how I need to eat in order to be a world-class table tennis player, then that's what I'm going to do. And all that was so incredibly important, I believed, and I still do today. So that's all I'm going to say. I hope that was of value. I actually think, do you know what? I think that's probably my best ever podcast. I think I've really nailed what you need to do in order to win in business, to win in life, to win in sport, and to win in sales and marketing. So if you want any more help from me, I've spent 30 years working with small businesses. I nearly use the word expert, but I'm not going to use that horrible word. I'm a master. That sounds like a Jedi master. No, I'm not one of those either. But what I do know is what works. I specialize. If you to ask me, what do you specialize in? I specialize in helping businesses to get everything they can out of all they've got. That's what I do. If you want to some help with that, book a free meeting with me. I don't buy, I don't pressure people into selling. I tried my best to help them during that meeting, provide some really good advice. And if I do that, my belief is they'll want some more really good advice. So if you want some more really good advice, take the first step, go to my website, results-mastery.com, and get yourself booked onto a meeting. You'll see big gold buttons. Click one of those and get yourself booked onto a Zoom meeting just like this one, and we can then move forward. So thank you ever so much for listening, and look forward to speaking to you on my next podcast. Don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel as well, to keep up to date with everything that I'm doing. And by the way, when you do go to my website, don't forget to join my community. There's a button on the homepage that says Join Steve's Community. Do that and you'll really benefit. Thank you very much for listening.